There we go. All right, we are live. Episode number 2, maybe technically number 1. Morgan Stuart with me and Craig LeBlanc. We are with the Daily Bitcoin Podcast. Something I've been dying to start, but I've just been so busy creating another podcast for the Parks and Rec industry, having a blast doing that. But this time I got a whole team of content creators with me. I got a full-time video content creator and video editor, social media manager, and someone that's helping me with distribution. So that way I don't have to do a lot of that work. And I'm getting so much better at StreamYard, but I've been having some major withdrawals talking about Bitcoin. So Morgan is part of my local Bitcoin meetup group in Baton Rouge. And I asked him to come on this Friday, but we had some conflict. So this is actually our first show at this time slot. Let me see what the live thing looks like here. Oh yeah, okay, it is live. So now let me see if I can boost it. Let's see, share, post this.
Oh, thanks so much for having me on, Craig.
Oh yeah,
how's it going? I've been really looking forward to our talks. Such great talks at our local meetups.
Yeah, Morgan is one of those guys that you could just, and maybe you'll have the same experience at Bitcoin meetups, where you just run into these people that have such a depth of knowledge. And so we get to find out where that depth of knowledge comes from Morgan. So Morgan, why don't you maybe take us back to, you started this in what, 2017 is when you discovered it?
Yeah, it was actually 2017. It actually didn't start in the Bitcoin space, really. It started for me with an economics background. So even as far back as high school, I was always fascinated by economics and incentives. And I had this question stuck in my head ever since high school that something seemed deeply wrong with our financial system. And it stuck with me all the way through college, taking normal finance classes, taking banking classes. And it didn't take much digging or not even too many suggested links on YouTube to really stumble down the rabbit hole. And before you know it, you're reading The Creature from Jekyll Island and learning about.
Now, how did you get across this stuff in high school and early college? That was...
The funny thing is there weren't too many rabbit holes to jump down. Whenever you're in the kind of normie world TradFi space, you're not encouraged to go down these holes. And the only way you find it is really through the exceptions. Who's giving me the best information? And so in early college, I stumbled on a website, an aggregator called Zero Hedge. I'm sure you've heard of it.
I have not.
So Zero Hedge was originally if I learned this correctly, it was a Goldman Sachs analyst who decided to start up his own blog on a mixture of financial and relevant news articles, and started kind of being the edgy alternative news source conglomerator with with a bunch of extra contributors who offered contrarian opinions to the mainstream media. And this was back before you had a ton of encouraged spaces on whether it be Twitter. So it was back in the days of early censorship, say early 2010s. So Zero Hedge really became my loophole into contrarian thought, and you stumble on people that are actually questioning the status quo. And so my first person to stumble on was James Rickards. And James Rickards wrote the book, The New Case for Gold. And it was my first dive into the idea of self-custody. What are my true ownership rights, when it comes to stocks, bonds, other financial assets?
And when you say gold, you were buying the physical gold coins?
Physical gold, no ETFs, no futures contracts, none of that. It was the idea that learning about watching professors teach us about the banking system. And the idea was that, well, if my deposits aren't really mine and I'm just owed my money by the bank, that's a pretty dicey place to be in terms of my own freedom as an individual. And so naturally you start leaning into wanting to make gold or gold and silver to a lesser extent, core holdings in terms of, for a while it was somewhat apocalyptic in the idea that everybody was like, oh, well, the world's going to end, you should get some gold or silver in case you have to barter. And that was kind of the crazy idea. That's how gold and silver were painted. But for a huge portion of the world, this is your only option of holding money that can't be arbitrarily taken from you.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a way of pushing back against a system where ownership was just so iffy. The claims of ownership and what did you actually own? I mean, like most people have a mortgage on a house, have a note on their car. You don't have true control if it could be called away from you at any moment.
Mm-hmm.
And so self-ownership became a crucial idea and as a way to develop sovereignty. If you've heard of the book, The Sovereign Individual, this is really a natural grassroots development for me personally, from going from, oh, I'm a banking customer, oh, you're just some peon, we owe you some dollars. You get treated like a criminal if you try to take out more than $700 in cash, and you actually get flagged. And not having true control over your money is the banks, and if they would like you to have it. So, and
now, what do you think is the most misunderstood thing about ownership? We throw that term around like we own a car, we own a house, we own land. But, when you talk about a bearer instrument like gold and then Bitcoin, how does this, wreck the framework of ownership that we're used to?
if you've heard the cliche before, possession is 9/10 of the law.
Mm-hmm.
And who truly has possession over a given asset at any given time? Well, if I can put my hand on something, it's not owed to me. And so that was the true confidence, because if I'm watching inflation take off, and I assume I don't know anything about Bitcoin, I haven't heard about it, I don't trust it. The only thing I know is gold and silver are coming out the ground at a certain rate per year, and it's far scarcer than paper dollars. It seems to be a stable store of value that I would have control over. So that was kind of the jump into that space. It was about sovereignty and control over assets. And if you look at our general environment, over the political environment over the last 10 to 15 years, we've been stripping away how much control people have over their assets. I say we, the globalists, have been stripping away gradually your control. You saw the push, Agenda 2030. We want to have cashless society. We want to force people into using CBDCs. It's like, that is the antithesis of a free, open, prosperous society that you and I want to live in.
Yeah. And it's more about a control system. And I think that's why Bitcoin at least piqued my interest a lot, is its decentralized nature. That was a property I had not understood well until Bitcoin. Like, what's the purpose of what is decentralization, and how do you define decentralized or decentralization with regards to Bitcoin, its strength there?
Having one of the true weaknesses of the gold and silver as a savings vehicle was the centralization. So, for example, you have large banks such as JP Morgan, HSBC, RBC, taking in their vaults control of huge amounts, custodying huge amounts of gold and silver, and those actual the vaults are completely under their control. And so you've seen the spoofing that's gone on in the gold and silver markets. You've seen anytime control is centralized and you have no way to call a bluff, basically. So as an individual, we've seen the prices of gold and silver. Like, why haven't gold and silver kept up with the M2 money supply growth? Well, it's really been because we've had a paper system that's used to price gold and silver for the last 30 years. And this paper system, we're using paper to value real metal That's not trading hands anymore. We're just basing it on a futures contract
Mm.
and saying that it's not based on the actual exchange of metals for dollars. We're going to say, oh, how many people wanted to buy this contract over this given period of time? How many people sold the contract? But nobody ever really, the product never switched hands. And so there's so much room for fraud whenever there's no true exchange.
Mm.
And so like I was saying, decentralization becomes important because the banks have essentially centralized the control of all metals markets, being gold and silver as monetary metals. And that really forces you eventually to look into Bitcoin, because if you can essentially rig down the prices of gold and silver for decades at a time, and it has been done, if you can tamp those down, you can keep a true lid on what is the actual inflation rate. Because if gold and silver were actually allowed to run with the M2 money supply, the cat would be out the bag.
Mm-hmm.
You can't have the average person seeing gold, go up by 3, 4, 5x and still have confidence in their banks. So
Right.
in order to keep the fiat Ponzi scheme going, we had to tamp down the indicators, the leading indicators being gold and silver, that would tell you, like a dashboard on your car, inflation's out of control. So the banks have, through their centralization, have done a fantastic job at tamping down gold and silver for decades.
Yeah. And for the most part, don't you think oil was treated the same way? Because it's kind
Absolutely.
of, I think those are metrics that people use to measure inflation: is price of oil, price of a barrel of oil, price of gold, price of silver. And so if they're manipulated, then it's hidden. It's hidden from, once you can kind of control those leading indicators.
Yeah, you have to hide the true loss from people. It can't be apparent. We need people distracted. We need people tuned into football, chugging Bud Lights,
Yep.
the bread and circuses. That's what you need to distract people. And the reason why, I get somewhat sick of football is I'm thinking, how many of these people have heard of Bitcoin? How many of these people are actually taking true responsibility for their future and empowering themselves to create a future better than you're going to eat the bugs and you're going to live in a pod.
Yeah, and I think Bitcoin's kind of blowing the lid off. It's kind of it's pulling the curtain back and forcing people to see what a scarce asset is up against the current system, and it's just hard to deny.
The best disinfectant is light.
Mm-hmm.
When you shine a light on corrupted places, it pushes out the corruption.
All right, so you came in through the gold side, and then some of the problems that you saw. So now you're discovered Bitcoin. What does that look like?
So when I first discovered Bitcoin, it was back in 2017. I stumbled on Coinbase, and I remember seeing the website, and pretty much only thing that was listed was Bitcoin, Ethereum, Litecoin, a few alts, and the way you come and kind of view it as like, oh, this is kind of like a casino, and you don't have an idea, a broader base. They all, Bitcoin, Ethereum, Litecoin, they all seem like the same. You kind of go read some of the white papers, and they all seem like they're kind of copies of each other. You don't know noise from signal in terms of you really struggle to separate the wheat from the chaff here.
Mm-hmm.
And every Bitcoiner starts out as someone with a diversified portfolio of Bitcoins and shitcoins. So that was an interesting journey, because you start out and it took me a long time to realize that Bitcoin was a superior crypto asset. And it took actually getting almost wiped out of the first major bull market in Bitcoin, all the way up to 19 grand. Take a position, you go buy a healthy amount of Bitcoin, Ethereum, Litecoin, and you ride it up. And you just get scared out thinking like, oh, this is just a bubble, classic. And you see all the people throwing FUD on Zero Hedge. You get scared out of your first position. It's like classic. I feel like almost everybody in the space I've ever talked to got scared out of their first position because they hadn't done their research. They couldn't tell what was worth keeping, what was worth saving. They didn't have the conviction to hold on. And it took so much time to build that conviction back. So after I sold out, I mean, the irony is I sold back into metal and I was like, wait a second. It took me 2 to 3 more years before I really thought maybe I should look back into this, because it seemed to be that the fraudulent control over the metals market could go another 30 years.
Yeah.
It was more demoralizing than any Bitcoin bear market to me.
Right.
You never had, it's not like, oh, you're up 80% and we're down 40%. No, it's like you're treading water for years, wondering when are the metals markets going to break, because the right amount of people finally demanded delivery like they should of their due metal.
Yeah.
So you could wait for the metal markets to break, but it felt like it could go another 20 or 30 years. And that actually forced me to look for the quote unquote yield in cryptocurrencies for a while, because I was like tired of sitting on the sidelines and the sideways chop for what felt like 5, 6, 7 years.
Yeah. Now you had said something, which I've never heard this before, but I love this. We'll give it to you as a quote. But you said you can't come all the way into Bitcoin purely by greed. Can you say a little more about that?
Everyone comes into the space thinking, oh, how can I make my net worth go up? Everybody's looking for a quick fix. That is the wrong approach. If you say, I need to get rich overnight and I don't care how, sure, you can go make a meme coin on Solana and go rug a few thousand, maybe tens of thousands of people, and possibly ruins people's lives. I mean, like, what kind of world do you want to live in? And what does that say about you as a person? So the idea that you just want to go gamble and be a degenerate is not a good long-term strategy to become wealthy and knowledgeable and actually valuable to your community. You want to go find the absolute best, the best asset that actually aligns with your values, that has integrity, that is something that you can be proud of. And so
now, how do you help people from not, because matter of fact, I was at a convention, a Parks and Rec convention last week in Mississippi, and I met a guy that is, retired. He'd done pretty well. And we were talking about Bitcoin at the awards banquet. And I always have this, as I'm telling them more and they're wanting to get in it, I'm sending them the little Strike app and they're downloading it and stuff. And I said, no, look, don't buy any of these other tokens. They're scams. And I know that they're going to go do their research. They're going to go do that. And there's going to be a part in their journey where they're going to probably go buy a little Ethereum, a little of something else. And all they had was that one, hopefully they were listening, that one cautionary comment from me at the dinner table, don't buy anything with Bitcoin. But all the marketing dollars of all these other cryptocurrencies are coming at them, pitching their use case. Is there anything you do to kind of guide people in those first days? Or do we all just have to be, shitcoiners for a year or two till we get out of it?
I also try to save friends and family from going down the shitcoinery path. The easiest way I've found to start them off is if they start telling me, oh, what about this? What about XRP? What about Ethereum? I'll tell them, ignore that. Look at this. I'm going to help you sign up for River or Strike. And I'm going to give you some great resources to learn about Bitcoin. And you're not going to want any of those shit coins. You ignore those. And the fun thing is, like, you give them Strike or River, reputable exchanges with one-to-one proven reserves, and you show them how much safer it is. You show them you show them the best educational resources available, and then you only help them set up an account on a Bitcoin only exchange.
Yeah.
So I don't even give them the temptation of saying, oh, let's go dabble.
Yeah. You know, with that being said, I know I may have a lot of Parks and Rec people from my other podcast because that one's growing insanely fast. And they all knew I came from the Bitcoin community, and that's where I learned about podcasting and stuff. So if you're listening for the first time and you've never heard anything about Bitcoin, I'll give you a quick rundown and then Morgan can kind of add to it. But essentially, you want to get on a Bitcoin only exchange. I recommend Strike or River. Those are both great. That means you can only buy Bitcoin. There's no other cryptocurrency on there. That's a good thing. That's going to protect you from the temptation. However, it's not your Bitcoin until you take it off. So many people buy it and they just leave it on exchange. And you've even got like Jack Mallers, the founder of Strike. He's pleading and encouraging his people to take custody of their Bitcoin because it's basically one big lump of Bitcoin that is an attack vector for a big government. So he doesn't want that responsibility. So you have to take your Bitcoin into self-custody. We recommend a hard wallet. Any hard wallets you recommend?
Trezor.
Yeah, that's
Absolutely.
what I use. A lot of the OG Bitcoiners, especially a lot of the hackers and coders and stuff, they swear by the cold card, which is technically a little more challenging, but it's, you know, all of this is a YouTube video explainer away from being able to do that. But, and then definitely hammer out your 12 words, 12 to 24 word seed phrase in steel. And the last cautionary tale, if anyone asks you for your 12-word seed phrase, they're about to take all of your Bitcoin. So never give that to anybody unless you would just hand them a bag of gold or a lump sum of cash. Like you have to be able to trust them that much because anybody with your 12 words has your Bitcoin instantly. So no help desk, no service center, nobody trying to help you out should ever ask you for that. So that's kind of the 3 steps. Bitcoin only exchange, take custody in a hardware wallet, hammer it out, and steal. And anything to add to that, Morgan, for someone who's kind of new to this?
Never digitally share. No pictures of your seed phrase anywhere on any sort of platform. Don't brag to your friends. Don't share balances.
Yeah.
Don't tell them how much you have. You don't want to get wrench attacked in a parking lot at 2 a.m.
Yeah, I fortunately lost all of my Bitcoin in a boating accident, so I'm a fanboy now.
Same.
Yep. We don't have any. We just like talking about it. And
fishing trip.
That's right.
The worst fishing trip ever.
Oh my gosh, there's so much Bitcoin at the bottom of the swamps in New Orleans. I mean, in Louisiana, you wouldn't imagine. All the Bitcoin's going to end up down there. Okay, so back to it. Now, reputations will be ruined by altcoins. So let's talk about the temptation for Bitcoiners themselves that we think are, you know, pro Bitcoin people. They come out and then all of a sudden there's this massive temptation to start their own coin or to start their own, cryptocurrency or something like that because of some special use case. Like, let's speak on that a little bit.
Yeah, there was a guy I was following for a good long time. His name was Matt Kruger, and he put out fantastic educational videos, general market updates on Bitcoin, and he seemed to be a reputable player in the space. He even spoke at Bitcoin Nashville back in July 24, and he's not the only one, but there are others out there who have taken the opportunity to go cash in on a meme. Like his was SAB 121 being repealed, SAB 121 coin, throws it on Solana, rugs hundreds, if not thousands of people, where he went and ran up the price of this thing and sold it all at the top or almost the top and fleeced however many thousands of people. And just to think about the damage to these people's lives you're doing and what you've done to your reputation afterwards. Like this guy was what we thought was a dyed-in-the-wool Bitcoiner with integrity, who embraced the values of everyone else in the space, of having a low time preference and having and working for long-term results. He just threw it away overnight. it's just like, I wouldn't say it's like seeing your best friend doing meth and hooking up with your girlfriend, but I mean,
Yeah.
he basically did that to his reputation. He was tainted ever since that, and it's just so sad to see. Uh,
You, I can add a little to that as far as, and hopefully he survives and comes back and repents or whatever, because I know a lot of that stuff is tempting.
yeah, I
And
get the feet of Max Kaiser.
yeah, but I'll just say that a good sign that somebody is at least a solid Bitcoiner is they're usually fairly humble, and maybe they weren't humble when they started, but Bitcoin has a way of humbling you, especially if you continue down that journey of Bitcoin. You do have to get past number go up, because if you're there for number go up, there's a lot of number go up stuff out there. And there's always a shiny rock to go chase because they promise you get rich. But there's so much more to building wealth, which maybe you can pick a few that, the other strengths of Bitcoin that you discover when you go past number go up. What are some of those that kind of stood out to you?
Well, you and I had a great conversation in Lafayette, was it last year, where you were telling me how Bitcoin had a radical effect on your life.
Mhm.
There's a meme out there where you have the open Bitcoin standard on one side of the uh, room, and then you have these kind of mindless people go on the other side, and they walk under the book, and they come out with orange laser eyes,
Yeah.
and it was basically saying, you don't change Bitcoin, Bitcoin changes you. And
Yeah.
so whenever you start looking at your life through low time preference glasses, the orange glasses, uh, you start seeing it's not about how do I get instant gratification today. It's how do I build a sustainable future that embodies my values for the future. And hopefully those are values of integrity and honesty and transparency. And so you end up taking better care of your health. You stop spending as much money on beer, for example. You stop spending money on stupid purchases. You start saying, oh, this tiny amount of Bitcoin could actually pay for my godson's college or something like that. You
Mhm.
start finding new ways to save. You start finding new ways to give back. And whenever you start cooperating and working with other people in the space. So, like for example, like there was even somebody around the time of the election, bitcoinrocks.com put out a great educational website. You can put in your address, and he would mail you free signs with QR codes to learn about Bitcoin and teach people about it. So you
Wow.
just go put these up all around your town, and most of them will get pulled down, but it's worth it for the people that see it.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's so many more. I mean, I can rattle off a few, but I mean, if you raise your hand if you don't like theft. I mean, theft is something that has been around forever because we've never had something that's, I'm not even sure if this is a word, but unconfiscatable. Um, Something that can't be taken by force, or something that the force required to gather Bitcoin, far the cost of deploying that force. I mean, you could spend so much money trying to beat a Bitcoin wallet out of somebody's head, but then they've got $10 worth of Bitcoin in there. And so how many times are you going to try to use force? And so it really demonetizes violence, it demonetizes force, which means it demonetizes war, it demonetizes coercion. And so all forms of theft uh, really struggle in the Bitcoin world. And so if you look at how there's massive theft at the local level, maybe the city level, the federal level, the state level, are these countries, well, Bitcoin halts all of that, that you have property rights that no one can take from you when you have Bitcoin. And that is something that really attracted me, because that's a solution for planet Earth. Because, here in the US, we have a good banking system, or I say the best banking system. But now with Bitcoin, you can have the best banking system, and you can be in a country that's totally unbanked, that barely has electricity, that hardly has internet connection, and you've got the most pristine banking system asset class on earth in Bitcoin. And that is something that you don't really understand with just purely number go up. That was something that existed outside, it may be one of those other layers that you kind of run into. And I found that a lot of other Bitcoiners, they get into like node running, mining, they get into what's that other decentralized platform? Nostr. They get into Nostr to where you have decentralized communication and stuff like that. And so that's people that are continuing to going down that rabbit hole of stuff they just don't know, but you just keep educating yourself and it goes further and further and further. And that's where Bitcoin really humbles the lifetime learner, is it's just keeps going of the implications of something as powerful as this new invention of Bitcoin. Are there any others that kind of stood out to you?
Actually, I think it was what I told you about earlier. It was that JFK quote: "Ask not what your country can do for you, but what you
Mm,
can do for your country." Uh, it's that it's the low time preference.
yeah.
So back to the low time preference. If we say that, if we have the agreement that Bitcoin is a revolution, is a paradigm shifting technology that's going to actually shift us globally towards a more moral, more cooperative society. How do I do my part to support that system? And so, like I was explaining to you earlier before on our pre-call, that there's somewhat of a virtuous triangle. I like to explain like as three parts. So the one side of the triangle, you could say, I hold Bitcoin. I'm adding my energy to this network, and I have an ownership share and some portion of that 21 million Bitcoin. Then on the other side of the triangle, there's a slightly less self-centered option. There's called running a node. So
Mm,
running a node implies that you'd have a full copy of the entire blockchain, either on your laptop or on a separate device, such as like an Umbrel or a Start9. Having a full copy of that blockchain where you can actually validate your own transactions. You don't have to rely on anyone to do it for you, but you actually are a keeper of the flame, in a sense, of the Bitcoin network. Because if in order to harm the network, you'd have to go take out one of those nodes. You make it slightly harder to kill. It's anti-fragile. And so that'll be the second part of the triangle. So, and the third part of the triangle will be home mining. And this is kind of along the route of, you've heard of BitAxe, solo mining.
yeah, I had Scott. Shoot, I can't remember his name. It's Scott 9000. He's
Yeah.
the inventor. And then also shout out to Matt Hill, start with Start9. He was on the show previously. We're gonna have those back. He has a Start9. Well, you want to explain what Start9 is? Just it's a node that you can buy.
Yeah, it's usually a prepackaged node
Mhm.
operating system, usually with in its own hardware. So, like for example, I actually run an Umbrel,
Mm,
so it's has a beautiful interface. You can run multiple apps. You can use it as a home server. You can store your own files on it, on top of running, most importantly, running your own Bitcoin node.
mhm,
Uh, and you can even hook up your own home miners to it and monitor them. So it's great. Well worth the money spent, and the user experience is fantastic.
mm.
Uh, so the way I see it is, there's a triangle, this virtuous triangle, where one part is somewhat selfish in the fact that I'm holding Bitcoin and I would like to see number go up, and that in the very most basic sense. But to balance that out, you'd say, how do I strengthen this network? Well, I'm going to grow the network by one node. You go look at the number of reachable public nodes, it's something around 20,000.
Mhm.
That number needs to be way higher. I would like to see it, be 100,000, 200,000. That'd be fantastic. If I can do my part by buying a Start9 or Umbrel for $500, and I'm a, hardcore Bitcoin maximalist here, it's a no-brainer. You do it. You
Mm.
support the network in that way. You also would then branch out to say, like you interviewed Scott 9000 with BitAxe, you can run a small home miner, and you'd run it for a lottery mining. So you're only doing work to try to solve for the block. And so this is a one chip, one fan, no bigger than the size of the palm of your hand. cost less than $200. The running cost per day, less than 7 cents. So everyone can run one of these, and you have a chance at winning a block. Great if you do. Don't bet on it. The chances are low. But you do your part to make it slightly harder to hack this system. And you're adding hash power to the network. You're adding security to the network. So if I can add a node and hash power, I am reinforcing my ownership share in Bitcoin. So that's why I call it the virtuous triangle. Once you've already taken up the responsibility of holding your own keys and taking custody of your Bitcoin, the next logical step on your path is to support that network that supports you, to give back to that network.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'll add one more to that, and that would be recruitment. We need all the recruiters and educators and podcasters. If you're considering starting a Bitcoin podcast or a newsletter or, YouTube channel, please do. I will be a guest on your show. I'll share all the softwares and stuff that we use. I really encourage everyone to get out there and join the army of educators and promoters of this technology. And I'll tell you this is the one thing you'll get out of that. You might get a lot of like no's and stuff, but who cares about that? You'll help a few people and they will, for the rest of their life, thank you for getting them into Bitcoin. Most of the people that I've helped get into Bitcoin, every time they see me, they tackle me and they're like, thank you so much for getting me into this, kicking and screaming. And it's usually not like a one conversation kind of thing. You've basically attached yourself to show them how to get a wallet, how to hammer out their seed phrase, how to get on an exchange. Like you've kind of got a little classroom going now. And they will also want you to do it for them. What if I give you the money and then you do it for me? And you have to basically tell them, no, look, your education is more important. It's important that you know what you're holding. Otherwise, you'll just lose it, or you'll just not treat it with the respect that it deserves. I would say all dollars you put in the Bitcoin, you should be adding 2 zeros to them in your head. It's not $500; it's $50,000. You should treat every $500 in Bitcoin today like $50,000 because it's going to be there in a short period of time. My guess is 2040s, 2045s, by a lot of calculations, it should be 100x from where it is today. And that's if these other fiat currencies just hold a little bit longer. If they completely free fall and collapse, well, then it's just kind of game over. But yeah, so what are the other things that, well, I know we have to talk about MicroStrategies before the end of it, but is there anything else you want to talk about as far as, properties of Bitcoin or what you've learned coming into the MicroStrategies conversation?
Kind of riffing off what you were just talking about on the selfless nature of getting friends and family into Bitcoin, you got to hold their hands. It's a scary process for so many people because they feel like they're throwing money into a black hole and something that they don't understand. I remember like my first time buying was pretty terrifying, as was most people I know. Just in the same way that the first time I ever bought an ounce of gold and had to have it mailed to me, I mailed off a physical paper check. I was like, oh no, I just mailed off more money than I've mailed off in my life. Here I was, 21 years old.
Yeah.
And you get it back in the mail. You're like, whoa. Yeah. And it's just like that. It's a leap of faith, and people can't make the leap of faith without a healthy amount of encouragement from people that have spent time in the space, that know what to expect day to day, month to month. And the wave of adoption is here. You go look at the number of states with bills that are proposed already to have any sort of state Bitcoin reserve.
Mm-hmm.
Pension funds are buying. Nation states are now coming into the picture. Mainstream adoption's already here. No one's late.
Mm-hmm.
You're either gonna buy now or you're gonna beg to buy it later. You might as well learn right now.
Yeah.
And it just takes a certain amount of humility to do that.
Yeah, I really think it is. Bitcoin is, and I know some people will disagree with me, But I believe Bitcoin to some degree, or to a strong degree, is inevitable. It's similar to electricity taking over how we power things, how we light homes, um, the automobile taking over transportation from 1,000-year-old horse transportation system. Um, I know a lot of people don't agree with me on this one, but I believe the electrification of cars through Tesla and robots driving us is going to do the same thing. So I think Bitcoin is just one of these disruptive technologies that disrupts all things that are from the old legacy system. And so you probably want to ask yourself the question, what is Bitcoin disrupting? Maybe you can answer that question for us. What do you think Bitcoin is disrupting?
Bitcoin's it's disrupting way more than traditional banking.
Mm.
And that's where a lot of the reason why everybody comes out of the woodworks to write FUD articles about Bitcoin, you've seen like what's been 500 times Bitcoin's been declared dead since it was created, maybe 1,000.
Wow. I
You
wouldn't
can
doubt
go look up the hundreds of articles. Bitcoin's
it. Yeah.
dead. No, it dropped 10%. It's dead. It's always
Bitcoin
dead.
killer.
Yeah. And you get to you have to get past that. And you got to realize that clearly they're just trying to scare out the day-to-day traders.
Mhm.
And so, remind me, what was your question again? I'm sorry.
Well, so it's like when I think about Bitcoin and just I think you should become a student of disruption in general. Like study disruption if you want to understand the trajectory of Bitcoin. And a good example was I want to say the cell phone market was like maybe $1 trillion market when Steve Jobs walked on the stage with the iPhone. And so you would say, how big is the elephant Steve Jobs and Apple was consuming? It was roughly about $1 trillion. And then now Apple is worth what, 2 or 3 trillion right now. And so how can you become bigger than what you were eating? It was because he launched the invention of the App Store and so many other technologies to where it's no longer just a phone. Like the phone is just, we hardly even think of it as a phone anymore. It does so much more. And Bitcoin in a very similar way, it's like you said, it's not just coming after the modern banking system. It's coming after the word trust. Remember, this is a peer-to-peer trustless system. So who's in the business of trust and verification and ID and also property? And so who's in the business of property? That's real estate. Trust are, governments that have IDs. So most of the time you need an identification, like a state ID, to participate in the banking system of that nation. Whereas in Bitcoin, you don't need a lot of these. This is a peer-to-peer trustless system. All you need is a wallet address, and you can send it, and then the Bitcoin network just processes the transaction. And so, if you look at how large the trust business is and the property business is, we're talking like 300-400 trillion dollar collective industries. And compare that to what Apple was consuming. Apple was consuming a $1 trillion thing. Bitcoin's consuming a $400 to $900 trillion thing. And so it's just got a lot more room to grow sitting at barely a $2 trillion asset right
So
now.
back to disruption. So
Mhm.
if you have you heard of Saylor wrote a book back in the early 2000s or late 90s called The Mobile Wave. Have you heard of this book?
I've heard of it. I've never read it though. Have you? I need to.
I haven't read it. I've heard enough about it though to
Yeah.
know. In his book, he describes how cell phones basically ate analog objects. So with the innovation of the Apple iPhone, it wasn't so much that it was just a cool phone.
Mhm.
It's just that we've taken all these analog objects, whether it's even a measuring stick, you got a camera
Map.
on it, you got a map on it. All
Mhm.
these physical items have been turned into software, and you can actually put as an application. So that the real app economy was simply having software eat analog objects and having them all available to you almost instantly with a handheld device
Mhm.
in having them in the palm of your hand, any map to go anywhere in the world, did away with MapQuest.
Right.
The cameras in our phones are so good that a lot of people aren't buying higher end cameras anymore. A lot of people aren't even buying, though you have a flashlight, you have just about every app that could be made into software. And then the competition amongst the providers of these apps are so fierce that they're pushing down the cost to zero.
Mm-hmm.
As you heard Jeff Booth's talked about, the deflationary aspect of technology. So the idea in the mobile wave was that the phone ate analog objects. Now, the new theme is that we're going to have basically Bitcoin eat traditional financial assets, such as stocks, bonds, real estate. You're going to eat into the store of value market, disrupt the store of value market, because it does it faster, stronger, better,
Mm-hmm.
more efficiently without the risk.
Let's talk a little bit about that, because I don't think people that aren't in the world of asset classes or in financials, they don't quite understand the power of the properties of Bitcoin. When you say faster, stronger, better, less friction, that just kind of flies over people's heads. But if you have a basket of assets, say property, gold, Tesla stock, bonds, whatever, and you're looking at how they perform and what is part of that performance. So maybe we can describe what is performance. It could be, how fast can I sell my house if I have to, and then who can I sell my house to? I can't sell my house to someone in California that doesn't want a house in Louisiana. And so I have a small market.
Bitcoin as a store of value, everyone simply wants to remain wealthy. You want to keep your money, and when you monetize assets, the problem with basically since 1971, since we got off the gold standard, we've had pseudo monetary assets, which just means that we've had real assets out there that had a certain value before, that was mostly utility, like the usefulness of it.
Mm-hmm.
We've added an extra layer of value on top called a monetary premium, because we're treating those assets now as money, as a savings account.
Like piggy banks.
Piggy banks.
Piggy bank.
People treat their houses like piggy banks. People treat their 401ks like piggy banks. It's more like Bitcoin simply does those things better because it doesn't have the risks of, for example, real estate. You don't have to worry about a hurricane wiping out your property. You don't have to worry about bad tenants. You don't have to worry about lawsuits. You don't have to worry about
renters.
All the real world risks associated with real estate should actually discount that value. And so when you think about everybody will just pile into real estate, well, they're taking on a lot of risks they don't want to take on most of the time.
Can you explain what does it mean when you say discount that value?
Well, discount the value that, for example, you need to discount that monetary premium now that you've had the disruptive technology of Bitcoin doing it better for you. So if, for example, how many people own a second or third house as an investment or a rental property that really don't want to deal with the hassle, but still do it because they don't feel like they have any other option? So in real estate, for example, Michael Saylor, one of his famous presentations, he lays out a chart showing all the different asset classes, and he shows that in real estate, on an average year, you're going to get 10 to 11%. And that's if everything goes right. That's if you don't have any huge maintenance cost or a hurricane or whatever, and you're barely going to keep up with inflation.
Yeah, and that can be a good example of why you would discount the value of something. Is if you've got a property that's, say, beachfront, and it's in Hurricane Alley. So let's say it's right on the coast of Florida and they get regular hurricanes, then that's a risk that you're going to have to put into the equation, that there's a good chance I may have to deal with a hurricane wiping my asset out. And either I'm going to have high, or I won't be able to get insurance. And so that has to come into the negotiation of this asset, what it's worth. And so like Morgan said, Bitcoin is hurricane proof. Well, you can't lose your If you memorize your 12 words, you don't lose your wallet. But there's a lot of risk that's eliminated from a purely digital asset. I can send 100% of my Bitcoin overnight on a Sunday to, somebody in China or somebody in Africa, and I don't need permission. And as long as I've got an internet connection and I can process the transaction, I can do it for a fraction of a couple dollars. And you just can't do that with a lot of these other physical assets like gold and like real estate. And then also you've got markets that are just closed on the weekends and at night, and then don't allow you to send to people that aren't play nice with America. I've participated in that where they just kind of shut you down because you think you're funding something, and so they got to check in on you to make sure you're doing, things that they agree with. And so, yeah, I think you're right. Bitcoin just has so many properties that we need to understand. It's the first time we even having to understand. We never had a property that you could just that had all this superpower in it.
It's the indispensable asset, the pristine collateral.
Yeah. All right. So, man, we don't have enough time to go over the we might have to do a whole nother show. Why don't you give people like a teaser?
Okay, I'm gonna do a teaser of MicroStrategy.
Teaser of MicroStrategy, because I do not want you to rush this. You have so much insight on MicroStrategies.
The best way to put it is there is no second best stock.
Yeah.
And in the world where you're diving into Bitcoin as a monetary reserve asset, so we're treating this as an asset to preserve value on a balance sheet. That's what MicroStrategy has pioneered. They went out on a limb, and they were at death's door in 2020, right after the pandemic, and they saw that their time horizon was only 2 or 3 years unless they took drastic action. And they had a massive amount of cash, and they took the leap of faith after Saylor was talked into by many influential people in the Bitcoin space to take the leap of faith into adopting Bitcoin as a treasury reserve asset and making it his primary store of value in place of cash on his balance sheet. And since then, his company's gone from being something like a $1 billion market cap stock to being almost $100 billion market cap stock. And it's a juggernaut that's used both issuance of bonds, of low interest rate bonds, so convertible bonds with less than 1% interest rates, and at the money equity issuance, so issuing new shares on the market to acquire Bitcoin for the purpose of holding on their balance sheet. His model, whenever you go and read about his strategy long term, is much like he's basically copied Rockefeller's model for Standard Oil. So take the most precious store of energy in the world and then fracture it into all the different products that everyone needs to buy, from high energy being jet fuel all the way down to low energy being asphalt, and make everything in between so you can sell the best asset in the world to everyone who needs it in whatever way they need it. So
I love that analogy. I've never heard that before. You made that one up, or where'd you get that one from?
Well, if you go watch the quarter, his Q3 earnings call back in October for MicroStrategy, it was the most incredible earnings call you could ever watch. It was a mixture of charts and like a capital plan, where he had the largest capital plan in Wall Street history to go raise $42 billion, $21 billion in bonds and $21 billion in equity to go out and buy Bitcoin. He's done it, almost all of it, in 3 months.
Wow.
And but it was all in that Q3 earnings call where he really came out of the shell and showed everybody he's going to be the Bitcoin treasury company for the world. They're going to
Yeah.
break. They're going to break into being one of the most valuable companies in the world because they're going to deliver Bitcoin, digital energy, to as many of the people in the world, in the TradFi traditional world,
Mhm.
that need exposure, that desperately need exposure to preserving their economic energy
Mm.
through Bitcoin by either buying all the different products that MicroStrategy sells, everything from options to MicroStrategy stock to the ETFs. There's everything in between, all the way down to their convertible bonds.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think I love the analogy with the oil industry because I've never found a way to explain it, what they're doing. But now, of course, if you're an individual, I highly encourage people just buy the Bitcoin. But if you're not an individual and you're a governing body of a big chunk of money, so you've been given this money, here's the rules you can, and in those rules, you're not going to find any way that you can touch Bitcoin. And so how else can I get Bitcoin exposure? Well, MicroStrategy is a publicly traded company. I can buy Tesla, I can buy Apple, I can buy MicroStrategies. And because they're a Bitcoin holding company, along with all the other ways that they can offer exposure to it, well, now you can load up on MicroStrategies stock as one, and then all these other vehicles that they're allowing to. And just like John D. Rockefeller, he pulls the oil off the ground, he fractures it into all of them. He gives the plain people jet fuel, he gives the truckers diesel, he gives the asphalt people the tar that they need, and then he's making every product. And so there really is not another company out there that I'm aware of, at least, that's taking in Bitcoin and fracturing it out so it's consumable to all these different entities. Now, me and you, we can go buy regular Bitcoin, but there's laws, there's bylaws within these companies that they can't go buy an asset with as little regulatory clarity as Bitcoin, but they can go buy stuff that Michael Saylor is offering through MicroStrategies. And right now, it's just like blue ocean. There's no one else that's doing this. And even if they did try to imitate, why not just buy MicroStrategies? Because now you're having to compete with somebody who's already so far down the road. I don't know if anybody's even going to attempt to catch him on this. Do you know of anyone else that's even attempting to follow in his footsteps, or have you heard of anything?
So as of the last time I checked, MicroStrategy held 481,000 Bitcoin. The closest second place is Marathon Digital Holdings with a low 40,000s. So
Wow.
they're 10 times farther ahead than one of the largest Bitcoin miners in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Good luck catching up. There's no catching up because they have issued the most desirable stock and the most desirable bonds in the world. And those stocks and bonds have performed better than any other stock and bond in the world. You can go look up the performance, compare it to NVIDIA, compare their bonds are the most desirable on the market. So they outperform by such a huge margin. It almost scares some people away because they see volatility and they say, ooh, scary.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not about the short term. It's about the long-term vision to become the biggest holder of the best asset in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And in the end, MicroStrategy is going to be they're going to work their way in the S&P 500 this year.
Oh yeah. I mean, they should be there. They're there by now in market cap, but it's more than just market cap, but they're
They have
more
to show
than
positive earnings. Yeah.
positive earnings, I think over 4 straight quarters or something like that. And so it's, yeah, I'm hoping that they get in there. And then at that point, they've kind of gamified the system because now everybody's going to own MicroStrategies pretty much, because if they own a piece of the Fortune 500, it's going to be allocated to MicroStrategies. And then he's just going to use that new capital allocation to just buy more Bitcoin. And then he gets bigger, so he gets more capital and he buys more Bitcoin. And it's going to be a gamification of the Fortune 500. I can't wait to see that play out.
It's exciting times.
All right, so we'll go ahead and wrap it up. Thank you for coming on. Morgan,
Thank you for having me.
if you ever want to meet me or Morgan, just come to the Bitcoin, what's it called? Proof of Drink.
Proof of Drink.
Mr. Mark Cuvion was founder of that. And it's at the Bulldog, first Tuesdays, usually about 6 to 9. And we've got a great group of Baton Rouge Bitcoiners that hang out and have been for a long time. I think it's the longest running Bitcoin in the state of Louisiana, Bitcoin group. We also have a New Orleans group that me and Ted do on First Thursdays. So we got First Tuesdays and First Thursdays in the state of Louisiana. In Baton Rouge is First Tuesdays, and New Orleans is First Thursday. So y'all come on out, grab a beer with us. We'd be happy to talk Bitcoin. And if anybody wants to learn about Bitcoin, we could be happy to teach you in person. But appreciate you coming on, Morgan. We're gonna try to maybe we'll do a show just on MicroStrategies right before we get Michael Saylor on. We'll kind of warm things up.
Oh, that'd be great.
That's it. But appreciate you coming on, man.
Thanks so much.
All right, take care.
You too.
All right, so that was Morgan Stuart, fellow Bitcoiner in Baton Rouge. Thank you for attending or tuning in to the Daily Bitcoin Podcast. It's something I wanted to do for a long time, ever since I pulled away from the other Bitcoin group that I helped co-found. A lot of those guys are still doing great things. So, I mean, if you are in the space of Bitcoin, creating content, man, keep going. And if you'd like to make content and you need any help at all, reach out to me. I'd be glad to kind of show you the stuff that I've learned, just the technical side. And look, I'm just passing on what people have taught me, whether it's the mics or the soundboards or the software to use. I use StreamYard. It's a pretty cool one that one of the guys showed me. This is a Rode mic that I have here. So I'd be happy to help any podcaster globally. Reach out to me, hit me up on X. Let's get this movement going. We need as many people teaching about Bitcoin in all languages on all platforms. I'm really going to make a push this year to get back into Nostr as well. Damus is a platform that I have some stuff going on. So we'll be airing this it's on my LinkedIn, it's on my Facebook, it's on X. And then, of course, this is airing live on the Daily Bitcoin Podcast account on X. It's going to be uploaded to YouTube. We'll create a little YouTube library. And then after I get a few episodes under my belt for this, get my feet wet, I'm going to have our digital artists coming on and creating just 2 or 3 minute Bitcoin commercials. And so I have a little stable of artists that's helping me out with the Daily Parks and Rec podcast, another podcast that I started for the Parks and Rec community. I can check that out also on X. And so I told them, let me get my feet wet on this, and we are going to make some good stuff. These are some very talented artists, and we're actually pulling the trigger on hiring another one. So glad to have these guys contribute and add their artistic ability to tell the story of Bitcoin. But again, this is Craig LeBlanc with the Daily Bitcoin Podcast, airing Sunday through Thursdays, 9 p.m. Eastern. I will be here with as many guests as I can. Sometimes it'll just be me chatting with y'all, teaching a little bit about Bitcoin. Maybe I'll pull down one of my Bitcoin books and just read some of it and then do some commentary on it. But I've got quite a growing list of people that want to come on the show, just old friends of mine that I've met through the Bitcoin ecosystem on my last push. And I'm really excited to launch this because, gosh, I don't know how long it's been. Maybe I've taken a year off of creating content for the Bitcoin community, but I'm back. And thank you for all the encouraging words. I don't think there was a day that went by that I did not have somebody asking me, when am I going to get back into creating content for Bitcoiners? And so thank y'all so much for encouraging me and bringing me back. So love you guys. I will see y'all again here tomorrow, 9 p.m. for our Monday show.